Statistics students, and welcome to the lesson on collecting sample data. And first, we're going to talk about observational study versus experiment. And we know that there's some intuition about a study and experiment, but in this class we have to give a formal and strict definition to each of these because the definitions are very much important. So, an observational study is when you collect or measure data or information without modifying the subjects. Okay? So let me give you an example. So an example would be, asking people if they slept a lot of hours or how many hours did you sleep yesterday. Okay? So when you're asking people how many hours did you sleep last night, you're collecting information, you may be even measuring it, but you're not changing the people that you're studying. You're not telling them to sleep a certain number of hours. Okay? Now let's contrast that with an experiment. You would apply treatment, and then you try to observe the effects of the influence of those treatments on the subjects. Okay? And the key word here, I think, is treatment. In other words, you're doing something to your subjects. Okay? So you're doing something to them, and then you're observing those effects. Okay? So an example of that, and there are tons of examples, would be giving some people medication and then seeing how they respond to the medication, or asking people to exercise. So the treatment in that case would be the exercise itself. So anytime that you are changing the people you're studying, modifying their effects, in those instances, you are conducting an experiment. Modifying the person and watching the effects, you are conducting an experiment. If you're not giving them any sort of treatment, then you are just conducting an observational study. Now let's move on to the next scenario. This time we're going to talk about simple random samples, and probability samples, and we'll see kind of an example of all of these. A simple random sample, every member of the population is equally likely to be selected. Okay? And all the groupings or all the samples is possible and equally likely, and we abbreviate this SRS. So every member is equally likely to be selected, and every grouping is possible and equally likely. Okay? In a random sample, it's the same thing as a simple random sample, but not every grouping or sample is possible. Okay? So let's take a look at a quick example here. This will probably illustrate it better than anything that I'm saying right now. I had a sample of 1,000 subjects, 500 female, 500 male. First thing, and I try to take the sample by placing all names in a hat and selecting 100 names randomly. Okay? So in this case, this is a simple random sample. It's simple random because everybody has an equal chance of being selected, and all groupings are possible. Now let's contrast this with the second possibility that I'm going to present here. So I put all the females into one hat, all the males into another hat, and then I select 50 names from the female hat, 50 names from the male hat. So this is still a random sample because every member of the population is equally likely to be selected. If you're a man, the probability of you being selected is 50 out of 500, or 10%. If you're a female, the chances of you being selected is also 50 out of 500, so that's also 10%. Okay? But the difference here is that certain groupings are not possible. Okay? So you cannot have a grouping, you cannot have a sample of, let's say, 40 females and 60 males. Okay, this grouping, this sample is not possible because in this case I am forcing it so that there has to be 50 female and 50 males. Okay, so it's not a simple random sample. This is just a random sample. Okay, so hopefully that clears things up a little bit. And then let's move on, and we're going to talk about a probability sample. I'm running a little bit out of space here, but that's okay. I'm going to continue the probability sample discussion here. Okay? So in a probability sample, not everybody is equally likely to be selected, but at least we know what the probabilities are. So not every member has an equal probability of being selected, but the probability is known. So at least we know what the probability is that each person is selected, even though it might not be equal. Okay, so these are three categories of samples. We will talk in the next video about the different methods of sampling. Okay, but at least you get the idea here what a study is, an experiment is, and then three types of three big umbrellas of sampling, through different groups or types of sampling that we can have. Okay? Alright, so I'm going to end this video here. We will continue the next one and talk about different methods of sampling.